Good morning, Alex and friends. I'm Grace. Today is Thursday, May 15th, 2025, and you're listening to Alex's News. The weather in Riverside is looking quite comfortable today, with a high of 77.3 degrees and a low tonight of 56.2. It's a great day to get outside if you have the chance. Coming up on the show, we are closely examining the significant controversy and international discussion sparked by Israel's deadly strikes in Khan Younis, exploring the different perspectives on this complex situation. Then, we shift our focus to California, where major changes are being made to environmental laws. We will investigate the reasons behind this overhaul and what it means for the future of urban housing development in the state. All this and more coming up on Alex's News. Stay tuned. We begin this morning, May 15th, 2025, with troubling news: overnight Israeli airstrikes on Khan Younis in southern Gaza. For more, here's our news reporter, Ethan. Ethan, what are the initial reports?
Grace, the news is grim. Nasser Hospital reports at least 54 people killed in Khan Younis, a figure cited by NPR, the Economic Times, which references the Associated Press, and the South China Morning Post. This tragically marks the second consecutive night of heavy bombing in the Gaza Strip.
A second night? What more do we know about this continued bombardment?
NPR detailed that Wednesday's strikes, May 14th, had already killed at least 70 in northern and southern Gaza, including nearly 24 children. For today's attacks, an AP cameraman, as reported by the South China Morning Post citing the Associated Press, counted 10 distinct airstrikes on Khan Younis. The Economic Times added a harrowing detail that some bodies arriving at Nasser Hospital were dismembered, and the South China Morning Post noted some body bags contain the remains of multiple individuals.
Absolutely horrific. Are there any reports about specific individuals affected in this latest tragedy?
Yes, among them was Hassan Samour, a journalist working for Al Arabi TV. He was killed along with 11 members of his family. This has been confirmed by NPR, the South China Morning Post, and information from Perplexity API. It's a stark reminder of the human cost.
A terrible loss. These intensified airstrikes coincide with U.S. President Donald Trump's Middle East visit. Is there any connection or any hope his presence might de-escalate things?
President Trump is indeed visiting Gulf states, including Saudi Arabia and Qatar. According to NPR and the Economic Times, there were some hopes his visit could potentially lead to a ceasefire or more aid for Gaza. However, it's important to note, as clarified by the South China Morning Post and Perplexity API, that President Trump did not visit Israel on this trip. And as of this morning, Perplexity API reports no official U.S. government statement has been issued specifically addressing these latest Khan Younis strikes.
So no word from the U.S. yet. What about Israel? Has the Israeli military commented on these specific operations?
As of the initial reports, the South China Morning Post and Perplexity API indicated the Israeli military had not commented. Perplexity API further confirmed later in the day that the Israeli Defense Forces, or IDF, still had not released a statement detailing the specific targets or justification for these particular May 14th and 15th strikes, leaving many questions.
It certainly does. Can you remind us of the broader context here for Israel's actions?
Israel's stated military objective, as reported by NPR, is to destroy Hamas, which governs Gaza. This current conflict escalated significantly after Hamas-led militants killed 1,200 people in southern Israel on October 7, 2023. Israel's retaliatory offensive since then, according to figures cited by NPR, has killed nearly 53,000 Palestinians. NPR also reports that Hamas is believed to still be holding 58 hostages.
And amidst all of this, the humanitarian situation in Gaza has been described as dire. Has it worsened further?
It appears so, Grace. NPR has reported that Gaza's only hospital providing cancer treatments, the European hospital Khan Younis, is out of service due to Israeli strikes. Critically, Israel halted the entry of all aid into Gaza back on March 2nd of this year, which, as of today, May 15th, was 74 days ago. This has led to severe warnings of potential famine, with NPR stating nearly 500,000 Palestinians face possible starvation. The Economic Times and the South China Morning Post also note Gaza has been under an Israeli blockade for 3 months. It seems attempts at asterisking the situation are truly blocked.
74 days without aid entry. What are international bodies saying about this?
The UN has warned that Israel's blockade of Gaza contravenes fundamental humanitarian principles, as highlighted by Perplexity API. And going further, Human Rights Watch, according to NPR, has accused Israel of potentially committing genocide, citing its plan to seize Gaza, displace hundreds of thousands, and block all imports.
Extremely serious charges. With such a high civilian death toll, what's being said about the legality or justification of these strikes? It sounds like a legal minefield.
It is. Perplexity API provided analysis stating there is no specific, publicly available evidence from Israel that these May 15th strikes targeted legitimate Hamas military objectives. The high civilian toll raises concerns about international humanitarian law, or IHL. For those unfamiliar, IHL obligates states to distinguish between combatants and civilians and ensure proportionality in attacks, meaning military gain shouldn't disproportionately harm civilians.
So IHL is about protecting civilians. But isn't there an argument often made about militants operating in civilian areas?
Yes, and Perplexity API also noted substantial documented assessments regarding Hamas's alleged practice of embedding military assets within or beneath civilian structures in densely populated areas like Khan Younis. If confirmed, such structures may become legitimate military targets under IHL. However, the principles of proportionality and taking precautions to minimize civilian harm remain paramount. Without a specific Israeli statement for these Khan Younis strikes, assessing IHL compliance is very difficult.
Incredibly complex. Despite President Trump's visit, are there any glimmers of hope for a ceasefire, any light in this dark tunnel?
Hopes were certainly pinned on President Trump's visit, or even a recent U.S.-brokered hostage deal, potentially leading to a truce. However, Perplexity API reports that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has consistently stated Israel will not halt its offensive until Hamas is defeated. This dims the immediate prospects for a ceasefire. The situation remains a powder keg, Grace.
A very sobering update, Ethan. Thank you for your comprehensive report this morning. For our second story this morning, we're turning our attention to the Golden State, where Governor Gavin Newsom is trying to lay a new foundation for housing development, hoping to construct a solution to the ongoing crisis. Here to break it all down for us is our reporter, Chloe. Chloe, the governor seems to be making a big push.
He certainly is, Grace. Governor Newsom is really backing two key pieces of legislation, Assembly Bill 609 and Senate Bill 607. The main goal here is to streamline housing construction, particularly for what's known as urban infill projects.
Urban infill projects, can you elaborate on what that means for folks at home?
Absolutely. Infill housing refers to building new homes on vacant or underused land within existing developed urban areas. Think of it as filling in the gaps, rather than sprawling outwards. These bills aim to exempt most of these urban infill projects from a full review under the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA.
CEQA. That's a term we hear a lot when it comes to development in California. Why is exempting projects from it seen as a way to speed things up?
Well, CEQA, as reported by Palo Alto Online, which cited CalMatters, requires detailed environmental impact reports and public review. While intended to protect the environment, proponents of these new bills argue that CEQA's processes and the potential for litigation have become a significant impediment, causing delays and increasing costs for much-needed housing. Newsom's support, also noted by the Rough and Tumble newsletter in its editions from May 14th and 15th, signals he believes easing these regulations is key.
So, this isn't just a sudden move. It sounds like part of a larger blueprint.
Exactly. Information synthesized by Perplexity API highlights that back in 2024, Governor Newsom signed over 60 housing-related bills into law, many of which became effective this year. These focused on accelerating production, strengthening enforcement of housing laws, and addressing homelessness. This current push for CEQA exemptions is a pretty significant next step in that ongoing effort. He's even proposed directing environmental impact fees from development towards affordable housing near public transit.
It sounds like he's trying to build a strong case. What's the current status of these bills, AB 609 and SB 607? Are they making headway?
They are. According to Perplexity API, Assembly Bill 609, which was introduced in February, has already passed through the Assembly Natural Resources Committee and the Assembly Housing Committee in April. It's now waiting for action in the Assembly Appropriations Committee. Senate Bill 607, introduced by Senator Scott Wiener, also in February, is scheduled for a hearing in the Senate on May 19th, which is just 4 days from now. A key part of SB 607 is requiring the mapping of eligible urban infill sites by July 1, 2026.
So the legislative wheels are definitely turning. You mentioned CEQA being an impediment. Is there a consensus on that or specific examples of how it's been a roadblock?
Proponents certainly believe so. Perplexity API references a 2025 report from an Assembly Select Committee that identified CEQA as a primary obstacle to meeting California's housing shortage, which is estimated at a staggering 2.5 million units. The report specifically cited lengthy reviews and litigation. There's even an example of a 494-unit infill project in San Francisco that was stalled by a CEQA appeal over gentrification impacts, and the delay made the project financially unfeasible.
That's quite a hurdle. But surely there must be some opposition to scaling back environmental reviews. It sounds like a delicate balancing act.
There is indeed opposition, Grace. Critics, as noted by Perplexity API, raise several concerns. They fear that broad CEQA exemptions could weaken essential environmental safeguards, potentially harming ecosystems and air and water quality. There are also worries about a loss of public input and oversight, as CEQA provides a platform for community engagement. Some also express concern that developers might exploit exemptions, and that accelerated infill housing could lead to gentrification and displacement without adequate protections.
So it's a classic case of trying to solve one problem without creating another. Is there definitive proof that CEQA is the main villain in the housing shortage story more so than other factors?
That's a really important question. Perplexity API notes a lack of specific, comparative quantitative studies published recently that directly isolate CEQA's impact versus other obstacles like restrictive local zoning, labor shortages, material costs, or financing challenges for these urban infill projects. While reports suggest CEQA is a major obstacle, they tend to be more qualitative. So while policymakers are strongly focused on CEQA, it's acknowledged that these other factors also significantly impact housing development. It seems the legislative drive is based on a strong conviction that CEQA is a primary bottleneck, even if the hard comparative numbers aren't fully detailed.
It sounds like a complex issue with many layers, and one that California will be grappling with for some time. Thanks for building out that picture for us, Chloe, and for explaining all the nuts and bolts.
You're welcome, Grace. And for our viewers interested in further details, the information discussed today was drawn from reporting by Palo Alto Online, which published original work by Cal Matters, the Rough and Tumble newsletter, and analysis synthesized by Perplexity API.
Here are some other headlines. The International Criminal Court's work has reportedly been halted following sanctions imposed by U.S. President Donald Trump. This action came after the ICC issued arrest warrants in November 2024 for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, and a Hamas commander, Mohammed al-Masri, alleging war crimes in Gaza. On February 6th of this year, President Trump responded with an executive order sanctioning the ICC and its chief prosecutor, Karim Khan, including asset freezes and entry bans. These measures have significantly hindered the court's operations, with reports that Prosecutor Khan has lost access to his email and bank accounts, and American staffers at the ICC have been warned of potential arrest if they travel to the U.S. Some non-governmental organizations have also ceased cooperation. UN experts and human rights groups have condemned the sanctions as an attack on global rule of law, affecting ICC investigations beyond the Israel-Palestine situation, including those in Afghanistan, Ukraine, and Myanmar. Meanwhile, divisions are emerging among House Republicans regarding President Trump's legislative package, which proposes approximately $5 trillion in tax cuts and over $1 trillion in reductions to Medicaid spending. Some Republican members, particularly from high-tax states, are demanding changes to state and local tax deductions, while conservative factions like the Freedom Caucus believe the Medicaid cuts don't go far enough. Despite these internal disputes, House Republicans are working to advance the bill, which would likely need to pass without Democratic support. Economic analyses suggest the tax cuts could boost long-run GDP by 0.6% but would also significantly reduce federal revenue. The Supreme Court is set to hear arguments on May 15 concerning President Trump's initiative to abolish birthright citizenship for children born in the U.S. to undocumented parents or those on temporary visas. The administration is seeking to lift nationwide injunctions imposed by federal judges who argued the policy violates the 14th Amendment. A key issue before the court will be whether lower court judges can issue such universal injunctions against federal policies. In international security, Latvia's Defense Intelligence and Security Service has issued a warning that individuals posing as lost tourists or hikers in forests might actually be Russian saboteurs or spies. The agency advises looking for individuals who appear unkempt, are overly equipped, have military haircuts, or wear mismatched military or sportswear. These individuals may ask suspicious questions or linger near military or critical infrastructure sites. This warning comes amid heightened regional tensions and allegations of Russian sabotage, which Moscow denies. And finally, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has arrived in Turkey for peace talks regarding the conflict with Russia. However, Russian President Vladimir Putin is not attending, instead sending a lower-level delegation. President Zelensky described the Russian delegation as, quote, theatrical and lacking decision-making authority, while emphasizing Ukraine's high-level representation. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan is expected to advocate for an immediate ceasefire. Zelensky has previously challenged Putin to meet directly for more substantial negotiations. That's all we have for now. Today's episode was made by Alexander King with Claude Sonnet 3.7, Gemini Pro 2.5 Experimental, Gemini Flash 2.0, Perplexity Sonar Pro, and Google Cloud Text-to-Speech. I hope you have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow, Alex.